Hello, my name is Daniel Sweetser, and I'm reading through my novel Hope Starts Small. And I am reading, I think it's chapter 4, part 3, Omaladen. One of the most peculiar things about Alma was her purse. She kept a rather large one, and it functioned like Mary Poppins' carpet bag. She always had something in it for everyone. Once Frank remembered her pulling cured meat out of her purse. She was full of surprises. This, along with her inclination to never let Constance leave the house after a visit without some food to go, had earned her the nickname Omaladen, or Grandma Shop. Opa had a proclivity for buying good deals in bulk, and so the family would often have random excess supplies of oranges or potatoes or whatever else had been on sale. And Oma knew that if it didn't get distributed, it might rot. So she would never let anyone leave their home empty-handed. When Frank had married Constance, he saw this firsthand. She would always be this way, but it became even more pronounced after Frank and Constance began having kids. Constance was a private cello instructor after Jeremiah was born, and she would often leave him with Oma and Opa while she went to teach. Then Frank, after leaving work, would come and pick him up. And Frank remembers that he rarely left the house without a meal or snack to go. It was almost like an exit fee. You could not pass through the doors to leave empty-handed. And this generosity was both instructive and contagious. It was fun for Oma to share and bless people, and you could tell. Frank and Constance, for their own part, though homebodies and fairly introverted, would sometimes have their own Omaladen moments, and so could feel and share in the same quiet delight. There were other treasures given, of course, besides food. As Jeremiah grew, Oma and Opa's house became special for other reasons. There were particular toys set aside, familiar and coveted. There were familiar games that Oma would play with Jeremiah. For his part, Opa would often be in his study, secluded, but he would come out and observe the fun, taking note and enjoying it in his own way. He particularly liked to recount the stories of what had happened, although he was rarely the facilitator. There were birthday meals for Frank and Constance, cooked by Oma with love, and holiday meals were often at her place. But those thorns kept cropping up. Sometimes it meant that Opa's mood soured and a meal or a holiday became tense or ended early. But most often the thorns were logistical. He collected so many things, and over time, this meant the boxes began to collect on every flat surface in the house, including the dining table. Oma was not often insistent, but when it came time to try and host a meal, she would direct Opa to clear the dining room table. Then would ensue an ironic chaos as the boxes would double or triple, spread all over their home, and then eventually consolidate, well-ordered, stacked somewhere else. This pattern would repeat for Thanksgiving or Christmas or a birthday, but over time it became harder and harder for Opa to find other places to put things. The thorns were growing unabated, especially when he retired, and eventually there was little room for anything else to grow. It was here now that Oma had begun losing a part of herself. Their home was filled to the brim with Opa's treasures and trash, and so they stopped entertaining guests. In the midst of it, Oma had only one relief. She would sit in her comfortable lift chair and look out the window, getting a view of a world that was bright and clean, so contrary to the one she had to live in. When Frank and Constance moved to New York, it was with an understanding that both Oma and Opa would move there as well. Frank and Constance had purchased their house in town specifically because it had a large in-law suite, and the hope was that it would be large enough to convince Opa to come. After Frank and Constance got settled, they began to ask for this very thing, regularly, insistently. And at a certain point, Opa determined that Oma should go first, in advance of him, leaving him to finish sorting and packing. So Frank rented an RV and went to get her. To Opa's credit, he filled the RV with furniture and boxes that were mostly hers. They were things she wanted to have with her, like a bureau, some bookshelves, and her trinkets and treasures to put on display. Frank and Constance ultimately wanted both her parents with them, but in that moment they were most concerned about Oma. They wanted her to be in a place that was clean and uncluttered, without the black mold, suspicious smells, and claustrophobic pressure she faced every day. So Oma came, bravely, boldly. The trip was unpleasant, bumpy, bad for her legs. But she came, eventually recovered from the trip. Then, in the place in town, she had a unique opportunity not afforded to her before. Opa did say he would come, and so she had not in principle left him. But practically speaking, she was now mostly on her own. She decorated the walls the way she wanted. She had a sunroom filled with toys for the kids. Opa would visit and bring with him more boxes, and Oma would let them crowd in on her small sacred spaces. But the distance meant that he could not so quickly overwhelm them. And so for the time they lived in town, Frank and Constance saw Oma begin to bloom. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.